Hey, how's it going, guys? If you're at all familiar with the online slideshow community about military doctrine, you'll notice the format is kind of the same as another YouTuber that I ripped off, Haroon, the Australian MOD guy that does everything you could ever imagine. So if you like these kind of presentations, definitely check out Haroon, although you probably know more about him than you do about me. So, anyway, let's get into it. Battlefield 6 just dropped, and it's really good. There are a lot of people playing it, and a lot of people coming from other games. Now, people have been clowning on people from Call of Duty that are moving to Battlefield, and I want to potentially expose another group that's moving to Battlefield that is coming from War Thunder. Now, War Thunder is a game that has tanks in it, and no infantry. It has tanks, planes, and helicopters, but no infantry. And that leads to a different type of play with the tanks than there should be in Battlefield, in my opinion. Because Battlefield, like other games like Arma 3, past Battlefields, has a good mix of tank and infantry and aircraft combat that all work together with in-game spotting systems and communication through the game and through Discord that allow for tanks to be utilized to the fullest extent possible. And what I'm seeing is a lot of people playing the tanks like they're playing them in War Thunder. And I wanted to make this presentation on players that are new to tanks or new to Battlefield, or games like it. So I will compare Battlefield a lot to Arma 3. Arma 3 has a game mode called King of the Hill, which is extremely similar to Battlefield 6. I would say almost identical. Basically, you fight over the same stretch of area. It's a big map. You have planes, you have helicopters, you have tanks, you have infantry. It's essentially the same game, although Battlefield is 10 years newer, so there are a lot of differences, but the same game as in the employment of the vehicles is the same. So with that being said, I wanted to go through and present to you guys how I think tanks should be used in Battlefield. How do you define a tank, or what are the characteristics of a tank? Well, tanks came around in World War I as a way to break through trenches, primarily. And then in World War II, you saw the German Blitzkrieg, or combined armed warfare. Often the two get mixed around or confused. People often use the word Blitzkrieg when it should be combined arms, or the other way around. But we're just going to use the word combined arms from now on. Basically, tanks are meant in the modern day to work with infantry, helicopters, and aircraft of every type to support the objectives of the ground team. So tanks can facilitate that by providing certain things that the infantry simply can't do. Now, what can't the infantry do? Well, the infantry can't get shot without dying most of the time, and the infantry don't typically have the firepower, unless they're an anti-armor division or something, to take out large threats. And tanks also provide mobility. So you're seeing here we have the triangle here. This is often used in online spaces to define the hard factors of a tank. So the hard factors are the stuff that you can put on a stat card. You don't think about so much the soft factors. So what are the soft factors? Well, the soft factors are crew comfort, optics, communications. Does every tank have a radio? Now, in the game, the soft factors are a lot less of a factor as they are in real life, and it comes down to the hard factors. But there are soft factors in the game that matter, such as the optics, for example. If you have bad optics in the game, they're not going to function correctly and do what you want to do with the vehicle. So, for example, in real life, anti-air platforms have automatic target lead indicators. This is represented in games like Arma 3, but in Battlefield, you simply have to guess and check by shooting at an enemy aircraft to see where your bullets go. There's no radar guidance of rounds or anything like that. So a vehicle is a combination of the hard factors and the soft factors. You can't just consider just the hard factors or just the soft factors. So with that being said, let's move on. These are the types of armor in the game. This graphic is from Toa Mandalore on Reddit. I stole it from him. basically. But these show all the real-life counterparts of the vehicles. So there's the Abrams, Leopard 2, Bradley, CV90, Gepard, and Cheetah. So I want to discuss a little bit, just briefly, what the differences are between these vehicles, between the two sides. So we have NATO and we have Pax Armada. Now the actual differences are virtually nothing. This game does not simulate, as far as I can tell, it doesn't simulate different armor, different rounds, different anything really. So the Bradley or the CV90 can penetrate a Gepard or a Cheetah just as well as the other can. They have different missiles as well, but in real life, I mean. But in the game, the missiles seem to have the same effect as the other vehicles' missiles. So I just want to point out, in the game, they are basically reskinned versions of the same platform. So there's no reason to consider differences in the vehicle name, only the vehicle type or categorization. So there's main battle tanks, infantry fighting vehicles, and self-propelled anti-air. So we can go ahead and talk about the MBTs now. So MBTs on the hard factor triangle land somewhere between firepower and armor, with a little bit less mobility as a factor. Now I want to real quick say that mobility is more than just speed. Being able to navigate over a trench, for example, or in the mud or on the ice. So mobility is more than just speed, and I will say tanks are really good at being mobile due to their tracks. So they can typically get through a lot of environments that wheeled vehicles simply cannot do. They'll just sink in the mud. But MBTs make their main focus firepower and armor, at least in the way the game represents it. I know there are sub-classifications of tanks, like a light tank, where it's more mobility, firepower, and less armor. We're not going to be getting into that. The game just simply doesn't present that. So what are MBTs good for? Well, they're good for taking out other tanks, and they're really good at fighting grouped up infantry. So if you have infantry in a building, you put a high explosive round in the building's no longer there, and the infantry is no longer there. So that's the role of the MBT. It can also be used as a spearhead in attacks. If you have an extremely entrenched position, driving a couple tanks up to that position will quickly de-entrench it, at least in the game. In real life, there are more convoluting factors. Anyway, moving on. The IFV concerns itself more with mobility and equally on armor and firepower. So the IFV originally is a concept from the Russians. So the Americans came up with the M113, which is a tracked personnel carrier. Basically, it would drop off a load of dudes, and then it would drive back and get another load of dudes and come back again. But what the Russians came up with is the BMP series of vehicles. I could be off on my history a little bit, but basically their type of vehicle would drop off the people, and it would stay with the people, and it would provide armored support. So instead of just a group of guys jumping out of the tank, you now have the tank sticking around with its big gun and a bunch of guys. So IFVs are pretty much designed to support infantry. They're built from the ground up. It's called an infantry fighting vehicle for a reason. The IFVs are typically equipped with autocannons. Autocannons are rapid firing guns that fire an intermediate cartridge. So an intermediate cartridge is something like 30 millimeters, where a tank cartridge is 120 millimeters. So IFV guns can technically do damage in the game to other tanks, but they're typically good against other IFVs. So an IFV v IFV fight is what you want to be in. If you're in an IFV fighting a tank, that's typically not going to go well for you. Now, IFVs have force multipliers, and those force multipliers are the guided missiles. So in the game, the TOW2 is what's equipped. You can wire guide that onto a target. Wire guide meaning you just aim it around with your mouse. And by aiming with your mouse, you can select targets and do a massive amount of damage. It's basically equivalent to being shot by a tank shell plus about 25% damage. IFVs do bring a lot to the table, but they're lightly armored and they don't have as much firepower as tanks traditionally do. They have a lot of mobility. So if your team is in rush, for example, and you're pushing through objective by objective by objective, and you're quickly capturing everything on the map, and IFV is what you're looking for. They also excel in multi-domain combat. So what I mean by that, you could, for example, be in a city and you need to elevate the gun enough to shoot up at a helicopter that's flying overhead. Say you're on the New York map, for example, and there's a drone above you. Well, the tanks simply are not capable of elevating their gun high enough or having the necessary fire rate to even attempt to engage drones typically, unless you're a crack shot. Obviously, there are clips of people doing this. But I'm saying generally, IFVs have the turret elevation. This is one of the soft factors, by the way. They have the elevation that allows them to shoot up at helicopters and drones more effectively. And so by employing them in that way, they can be a pseudo anti-air. And additionally, inside a city, you need to be able to shoot up at the top of buildings, which tanks typically are not able to do, again, if they're very close. A typical tank gun can only elevate around 20 degrees, while an IFV gun can elevate maybe 75 degrees. It really depends on what gun it is. So by employing an IFV in a more urban environment, it'll give you more benefit in the anti-infantry and anti-air role than a tank will give you. So how do you use it then? Well, like I've been saying, you don't want to drive off by yourself in a tank and think that you can be Rambo with it. You want to support the infantry, the guys on the ground that are capturing the objectives, and they will support you back. Now, a big threat for tanks in the modern warfighting environment, both in real life and in the game, is people with an RPG. RPGs are prolific, especially in-game. Literally, the entire enemy team could be carrying RPGs if they decided to do that. So, to be able to combat the threat of infantry's pelting you with RPG, you need your own infantry support on your side to be clearing buildings, to be taking out threats as they see them, and to be marking people for you to blow up with your big cannon too. So by having infantry with you and coordinating with them, you can, work to complete your shared objectives, to capture the point, to hold this, or capture the flag, or whatever else it may be. Another important factor is the positioning. Now, there are some technical terms, like for example, a defilade, where you're sitting in a hull down position. Now, hull down means that the hull of your tank, so a tank is separate. It has the hull, and then it has the gun. By hiding your hull in what's called a hull down position, you can only expose the guns to the enemy, which gives them a smaller target to shoot back at, and it makes it harder for them to spot you. Now, you're still in a tank. It's pretty easy to spot a tank, but at long range, for example, if you're fighting from one end of the map to the other, and you're sniping at tanks as they come out of spawn, a hull down position behind some sandbags or something will give you a great advantage over those tank players that just rush into the middle of the open field and get blasted by everything that sees them. Finally, one of the most important things is armament selection. So in Battlefield, you are allowed to pick 2 primary types of rounds and 1 missile type. Now, the missile type is for the Bradley or the IFV, but each one gets 2 shell types, and then additionally you get to choose what you mount for the coax and what you mount for the mounted gun. So the coax is a machine gun or HMG that swivels along with the main gun and is typically mounted just a little bit to the side of it. So if you see infantry in a tank and you don't want to shoot them with the main gun, you switch over the coax and you blast them with some machine gun fire. For both the coax and the commander, it's generally more effective at quickly taking out 1 or 2 targets that are in the open. That's because it does more damage than the smaller machine gun. What it isn't that good for is large groups of infantry. Now, if you're facing large groups of infantry and you fucked up and you don't have that infantry support with you, the grenade launcher or the smaller gun for the coax and commander gun are probably what you want, because the grenade launcher can deal a lot of heat Now, with that being said, explosives seem to be nerfed in Battlefield 6 pretty damn hard. You can shoot a shell next to a guy and it will barely damage him. So with that being said, on your shell selection, what I personally recommend for the main battle tank, you have the armor-piercing round. Now, that primary armor-piercing round will be for your anti-tank, anti-IFV role, and then you choose an anti-infantry round. Now, the most interesting of these could be the wire-guided one, the mouse-guided one, where you point it at infantry far away and you snipe them. That's an option. Another option is the high-explosive shell, where you shoot it next to a guy and it blows up like a grenade. And the final option I'd present for the anti-infantry role is the grape round. So the grape round is basically like shooting a shotgun. It's very ineffective at long range, but assuming you're up close and personal with the infantry, the grape round is pretty damn good. You shoot it at a group of people and it fires like 30 sub-munitions, 30 little shots at them, and it will absolutely obliterate anyone in the path of that weapon. The grape round is also available for the IFVs, but it does a lot less damage, and I would personally recommend you just stick with the dual purpose round on the IFVs. Now that's because the dual purpose does enough damage to IFVs that it can support your missile platform in taking out enemy tanks and IFVs. So I hope this presentation was of some help and was not a bore. I know there are certain type of people out there that will enjoy this type of presentation, so hopefully this reaches those guys. Anyway, have a good night, folks.